two teachers took out magical brooches and gently pricked them into a girl's fingertip. In an instant, the girl gained the power to control magic. To gain even stronger magic was simple. The teacher just needed to increase the level of pain. Students who could endure it would awaken even greater dark powers. These two teachers represented the school for good and the school for evil. In a school for good class, Professor Anemone taught students how to use magic to bring out their most beautiful selves. Meanwhile, in the school for evil, students used magic to summon powerful creatures and would stop at nothing to achieve their goals. Legend said that long ago, two brothers with immense magical power built this isolated magic academy. The heroes and villains from fairy tales all originated from this school. To maintain the balance of good and evil in stories, the brothers split the school into two factions, good and evil. Students in the school for good represented fairy tale heroes, while those in the school for evil represented the villains. New students were sorted into schools based on the good or evil in their hearts. But over time, Raffle, the brother who founded the school for evil, began to waver. Dissatisfied with evil's constant submission to good, Raffle secretly learned forbidden blood magic to defeat his brother Rian. Rian was caught off guard and began to lose the battle, but suddenly Rian swept Raffle's legs out from under him and dragged him over a cliff. Fortunately, Rian managed to climb back up, but Raffle fell to the bottom and died from the impact. For hundreds of years after that, the school for good and evil remained in balance under Rian's leadership, until the day two girls arrived and disrupted everything. They looked harmless, but they would soon unleash chaos upon the academy. In the distant village of Gavaldon, Sophie and Agatha were best friends, though their personalities were completely opposite. Sophie adored fairy tales and dreamed of one day escaping her boring village life to become a princess. Agatha, despite being descended from witches, just wanted to live an ordinary life like everyone else. On the night of the blood moon, a red-eyed creature dragged the girls into the forest. Before they could react, a giant monstrous bird appeared and grabbed them. After passing through thick fog, they found themselves at the legendary school for good and evil. It turned out today was the school's enrollment day. All chosen students were brought here to be sorted. Sophie was thrilled, believing she would finally enter the school for good, but to her shock, the bird threw Agatha into the school for good and dropped Sophie into the dreaded school for evil. Sophie was greeted by a pack of husky guards and a bunch of wicked, creepy classmates. She went to confront Lady Lesso, the school for evil teacher. She believed the bird had made a mistake, but Lady Lesso told her the school's sorting was based on the heart's true nature. In thousands of years, the system had never been wrong. Meanwhile, in the school for good, Agatha was led to the main hall by a group of gentle fairies. The students wore beautiful princess dresses and looked like living dolls. Even though Agatha insisted she didn't belong, Professor Dovey had no intention of letting her leave. In the end, both Agatha and Sophie unwillingly put on their school uniforms and attended the opening ceremony, as tradition dictated. Before the ceremony began, the school for good and the school for evil had to face off. A descendant of a one-eyed giant stood up from the evil side. His opponent was Tedros, the prince from the school for good and son of King Arthur. To everyone's surprise, Tedros' sword turned out to be a powerful magic weapon. With just one strike, he sent the giant flying. Lady Lesso responded quickly. With just a point of her finger, the giant's axe transformed into a magic weapon as well. With both sides on equal ground, Tedros began losing ground under the giant's brute strength. Realizing he couldn't win head-on, Tedros quickly picked up his sword from the ground, dodged a fatal blow, and used the sword to trip the giant. As the axe fell from above, the giant lost one of his arms in the brutal fall. Once again, the school for evil lost the duel. When schoolmaster Rian arrived to give his speech, Sophie and Agatha immediately stepped forward to explain the mistake. They insisted the school had sorted them incorrectly, but Rian told them to abandon that thought, because the school never chose the wrong students. That night, Agatha decided to sneak into the school for evil to take Sophie and escape. Just then, a small angel statue on the wall opened its eyes. Agatha turned at the sound and saw the angel come to life. She tried to greet it, but in the next second the angel grew rapidly into a terrifying creature. It turned out the angel was designed to hunt down escapees. In a moment of panic, Agatha ran into the library, barely avoiding capture, but just as she was about to leave, two school professors entered the room. They questioned why someone like Sophie and Agatha, who seemed so average, were chosen. It seemed the schoolmaster had a different purpose for keeping the girls. Once the teachers left, something eerie happened in the library. Blood began gushing out of the floor and pooled onto a table, quickly forming the shape of a human figure. The figure looked at Agatha and said, "Stay away from Sophie, little witch. She has a destiny to fulfill." Then the figure vanished. Meanwhile, back in a school for evil class, a girl stood up to challenge Sophie. A fire dragon slowly crawled out from inside the girl. It turned out to be her guardian spirit beast. The girl then controlled the dragon and launched an attack at Sophie. In panic, Sophie grabbed a shield and threw it at the dragon. To her surprise, when the dragon got hurt, the girl was hurt too. She commanded the dragon to strike again. Terrified, Sophie could only keep shouting for help. Just when everyone thought Sophie was done for, a swarm of bees suddenly shattered the glass and stormed into the classroom. They wrapped themselves around the fire dragon and started stinging it madly. The dragon thrashed around the ceiling in pain, and the girl who was controlling it collapsed to the ground. twitching uncontrollably. Seeing that the girl was about to suffocate, Lady Lesso quickly ordered Sophie to stop the attack. The bees slowly landed on the floor, and eventually took the shape of a human. It was none other than Raffle, the founder of the School for Evil. Lady Lesso was shocked. How could Raffle, who had died hundreds of years ago, suddenly appear? And why was he helping the new student Sophie? Raffle simply gave Sophie a wicked smile before turning into a swarm of bees and vanishing from the school. Meanwhile, over at the School for Good, Professor Dovey took her students to the Wishing River. She said anyone who left behind a heartfelt wish at this moment would have it come true. Agatha gently placed her finger into the water and closed her eyes. Suddenly, countless wish threads gathered around her fingertips. They gradually formed the shape of a little girl. The girl had been trapped here for over 100 years for failing her studies. During that time, she had been fulfilling the wishes of others, but this time, to her surprise, Agatha's wish was to grant her freedom. The girl looked gratefully at Agatha, then transformed into golden light and returned to her world. Just then, a giant monstrous bird swooped down toward the crowd. Everyone stepped back in fear, but the bird didn't mean to attack anyone. It slowly approached Agatha, sadness filling its eyes. The bird had once been Agatha's classmate. Because he failed his studies, the school devoured his body and turned him into this creature. He begged Agatha to end his suffering, but just then Tedros rushed in blindly and drove his magic sword straight through the bird's chest. Before the creature could even resist, it turned into a pile of bones and vanished into dust. Tedros thought his heroic deed would impress Agatha. Instead, she punched him hard in the face. Agatha turned to Professor Dovey with questions. She couldn't understand why the school would destroy a student's life over failed grades. It was nothing like the goodness she believed in. With a heavy heart, Agatha brought Sophie to see Rian. She asked him to send them back to their village, but Sophie didn't want to leave. She still dreamed of returning to the School for Good and becoming a beautiful princess. Rian told them that a true love's kiss could change everything, but to earn it they had to pay a price. Sophie quickly sought out Tedros and confessed her feelings to him, but what she didn't know was that Tedros secretly had feelings for Agatha. Sophie's flirty behavior also upset the school. The Husky guards dragged her into a dark chamber. Lady Lesso, feeling that Sophie had embarrassed the school, mocked and insulted her harshly. Then shockingly, she even cut off Sophie's long hair. Just when Sophie felt utterly broken, the sinister Raffle appeared again. He kept tempting her, telling her she needed to stop playing fair and do whatever it took to get what she wanted. Sophie believed his lies. She decided she would win Tedros' heart at any cost and secure the kiss of true love. Under Raffle's influence, Sophie underwent a dramatic change in both appearance and personality. She quickly became the center of attention and successfully attracted Tedros. But the School for Good and the School for Evil had always been enemies. The sight of the two together upset students on both sides. A chaotic fight broke out. To stop it, Rian decided to test whether Sophie and Tedros truly shared true love. They would enter the dangerous Black Forest from opposite directions, and if they found each other before dawn, then their love would be proven real. Late at night, the eerie Black Forest was bone-chilling. Sophie carefully stepped into a patch of flowers, not knowing they were actually man-eating plants. Terrified, she was bitten all over. She barely escaped with her life, but just as she caught her breath, she stumbled into a terrifying monster's territory. Panicking, Sophie tripped and fell. The pumpkin-headed monster raised its sickle to strike. In that critical moment, a bird flew in and blocked the blow. It turned out Agatha had been secretly watching over Sophie the entire time. Just then Tedros arrived too. Agatha reminded Sophie that only Tedros' kiss could break the curse of being hunted. Sophie ran toward Tedros, but the monster charged again. Tedros engaged it in battle, but the creature was fierce. Even with his magic sword, Tedros was overpowered and thrown aside. He yelled for Sophie to toss him the sword, but Sophie stood frozen. The monster was about to snap Tedros' neck. At the last second, Agatha picked up the sword and handed it to Tedros in time. He used it to slay the pumpkin monster. With the danger gone, Tedros shouted at Sophie why hadn't she helped him. Sophie replied that it had always been the prince saving the princess, not the other way around. That's when Tedros realized there was no true love between him and Sophie. He vanished, disappointed and heartbroken. To everyone's surprise, Sophie blamed everything on Agatha. She believed Agatha had stolen her place in the School for Good and taken Tedros from her as well. Even though Agatha tried to explain, Sophie refused to listen. She stormed off, casting one last hateful look. Back in her room, Raffle appeared once again. He took advantage of Sophie's fragile state and drove a wedge between her and Agatha. In that moment, all the friendship they once shared vanished from Sophie's heart. To become stronger, she accepted Raffle's offer of blood magic. As Sophie's soul grew more twisted, her once perfect face underwent a drastic transformation, now completely corrupted. Sophie found Tedros. She cautiously asked if he still wanted to be with her, but his answer was no, an answer Sophie had already expected. The students from the School for Good tried to take down the now witch-like Sophie, but with blood magic on her side, she was no longer the same. In an instant, she overpowered several students with ease. Agatha couldn't bear to see Sophie become this version of herself, but in Sophie's heart, Agatha was now an enemy. Sophie declared that unless one of them died, their story would never end. Then, without looking back, she walked away. Her plan for revenge had only just begun. At that moment, the students witnessed a terrifying scene. They all rushed over stunned. The teachers and guards of the academy had all been turned into puppets, each with a face frozen in fear. Tedros immediately suspected Sophie was behind it. He decided to lead the school for good to fight back against the school for evil, but he didn't know this was exactly the trap Sophie had set. Agatha tried to stop Tedros, but it was no use. She had no choice but to transform into a white dove and fly ahead to the school for evil. Inside the school for evil, everyone was dancing leisurely, as if nothing had happened, but in reality, they were all waiting for the moment when the school for good would strike first. Because if that happened, it would break the law of good defends evil attacks, and evil would then become the stronger good. Just then Tedros led his group and charged into the school for evil. Sophie released her magic, making it seem like she was about to attack. Sure enough, at Tedros's command, the school for good struck first. Sophie's plan had worked. By attacking first, good became evil, and evil, now seen as the side of good, grew stronger. The students of the school for evil gained a surge of power. Sophie, though now back to her beautiful self, still had darkness rooted in her heart. With just a wave of her hand, she turned all the school for good students into reflections of those from the school for evil. An unprecedented battle broke out between the two sides. With their newfound strength, the once outmatched school for evil overwhelmed their enemies, and with Sophie wielding blood magic, Tedros and the school for good were quickly defeated. But Sophie wasn't done. Her goal was to find Rian and defeat him to take over the entire academy. What she didn't expect was that Rian was actually Raffle in disguise. It turned out that Raffle hadn't died all those years ago. It was his brother Rian who had. For years, Raffle had posed as Rian to control the academy, planning to one day dominate both good and evil and claim ultimate power. But to do that, he needed the kiss of evil. Sophie's arrival had made her the perfect pawn. Consumed by darkness, Sophie obeyed Raffle's every word. Under his influence, she gave him the kiss of evil. Instantly, Raffle's power exploded. The entire magic school began to collapse. That's when Sophie realized she had been used all along. All she ever wanted was to defeat those who had rejected her. Not to kill anyone, but Raffle wanted to destroy everyone who stood in his way and rule the world. Sophie was overwhelmed with regret and guilt. She knew she had become the very person she once despised. Just then Agatha arrived. To her, Sophie was still her best friend. Seeing this, Raffle moved to eliminate the one obstacle in his path. Unexpectedly, at the critical moment, Sophie shoved Agatha out of the way and took the deadly blow herself. As Sophie lay dying, the power of the evil kiss faded. The academy began returning to normal. Raffle was furious. Then Tedros attempted a surprise attack, but he was easily blocked. Raffle pinned Tedros to the wall, ready to strike. At the last moment, Sophie used her remaining strength to pass the magic sword to Agatha. Agatha leapt into the air, caught the sword in a graceful spin, and brought it down in one clean strike. Raffle disintegrated into ash and vanished forever. As Sophie lay in Agatha's arms, she apologized for her foolishness. Then, full of regret, she quietly passed away. Agatha wept in sorrow, her heart broken, but perhaps it was her deep love and friendship that touched the god. Sophie's wounds began to heal, faster and faster, until miraculously, she came back to life. From that day on, the school for good and evil no longer had divisions. All the students lived, learned, and thrived together in harmony. Hand in hand, Agatha and Sophie left the world that didn't belong to them. To them, it all felt like a very long dream, and when they finally woke, their friendship had become unbreakable, a bond that would never be torn apart again.